Hey everybody, my vintage iron here. I wanted to do a little better job of explaining the installed spring height today. I did a previous video on it, but had a lot of questions. I don't know if I was as clear as I should have been. What we've done is we've put a high performance cam in this engine. It's a set of big block Chevrolet heads, and so we're putting on a set of high performance springs that go along with the cam. When you buy a cam kit or a set of performance springs, the springs are going to come with specifications. Now the specifications on this cam gives you the installed height, how many pounds per square inch it should have on the seat, and so forth. So what we're going to do is we need to make sure that our springs are sitting at the correct height on the head. In other words, I've got this tool on here, but I'll just show you this real quick. One of the things that we're concerned about, there's a specification for the height that the spring sits at. So in other words, if I put this retainer on here like so, these keepers and retainers are going to hold that retainer in a specific location. The distance from the spring pad down here where the spring actually sits and the bottom of the retainer where the spring contacts it, that distance there, you know, if you were to measure that, you could actually get a height out of it. That is called installed height. There's a specification for that because the spring, in order to exert the correct opening and closing pressures on the valve, has to be installed. When it's installed, it's compressed. It has to be installed at a specific height. If it's not installed at a specific height, it's not going to have the correct pressure on the seat over here to hold the valve closed, and it's also not going to have the correct pressure on the cam. When this valve opens up, when the cam opens it up, the spring pressure goes directly to the camshaft. So this tool right here, now I've got it in here where the spring is going to go. My spring is going to sit in there when it's compressed. It's reading 1 inch 902 thousandths, which is really close to 1 inch 900. My spec is should have 122 pounds at 1 inch 900 thousandths. So my height here that I measured is measuring 1 inch 900 thousandths. When you set up a set of performance cylinder heads with a set of custom springs and valves and a cam and everything, you have to measure your installed height. This is not something that is, you know, optional. So I know that I'm good on this one because I measured 1 inch 900 thousandths. So my spring height is good. I can go ahead, and the way that I do it is once I get the height right, I go ahead and put my valve seal on there and I move on to the next valve. I'll go down and do this one next. So that's basically spring installed height in a nutshell. So it's real important that we make sure we get this correct. The springs have a big effect on the way that the engine runs in the valve train. So anytime you do custom heads, and very often the machinist, if you take your heads to a machine shop, the machinist in the shop will actually ask you, well, you know, I need the cam card, I need the information. This is the cam card that came with this particular cam that we're putting in here, so it gives the installed height and the pressures and so forth, and the lift of the cam and all that. And also we have the specs, of course, on the box of springs. It tells us the installed height and the pressure and so forth. So we're able to take and measure using those specifications and make sure that our valve springs are set up correctly. If you don't do that, the heads are not going to perform like they're supposed to. So all this nice valve work we did, we put much bigger valves than stock in here. This is a set of 781 454 heads, and the customer wants more performance out of them. He wants the thing to run better. He's putting a better cam. He paid to have these big stainless valves, and we went ahead and we set these up on the seat and guide machine, and you can see all the fresh machine work we did in there. We did a real nice valve job. We cut the throats and put the 5-angle valve job on there. We got undercut, swirl, polish valves. So this is the kind of thing, you know, you got to be careful when you. One thing you don't want to do is just buy a high performance cam and slap it in your motor without, you know, knowing whether or not the springs are going to be at the right height. Now, if the springs are too tight, in other words, if you put a camshaft in your motor that has, you know, a lot more lift than stock, and you have stock springs on here, you're going to have a real problem. You could actually blow your engine doing that, because if the camshaft has too much for the lift for the springs, it'll smash the springs down until all these coils smash into each other, and then the rocker will actually try to push that further, and it'll break the spring, could drop a valve, could bend push rods, could bend valves. So you could have a very serious engine damage, even up to a blown motor. I had a customer that put a big cam in his engine a couple years ago, and he didn't change the springs or anything, and actually he busted a couple springs. One of the valves actually fell into the cylinder, destroyed the piston, and he had a connecting rod come out the side of the block. And that was all because he had the wrong springs and cam combination. So, you know, it's pretty serious. It's pretty critical that you get this right. So I hope that helps you and gives you a little understanding of what we do. Installed height has to be measured with an installed height gauge, and we got to make sure that this height from our retainer to our spring pad is correct. So if you don't have the ability or the tools to do this and you want to get your heads done, you know, you can send me a message. I'll try to point you in the right direction. I do heads all the time for people. Also, if you go to My Vintage Iron on Facebook, there's a lot of information and a lot of cool pictures and stuff. Go ahead and like me on there and subscribe. And you know, there's a lot of benefits to that. So hopefully this helps. There'll be more to come, and we'll talk to you soon.